don't like that. Okay. Okay, go.
Welcome back. So now we're going to talk about the good and the bad buckets. I mentioned in the last video how the subconscious was formed. Now what do we do with this information? Okay, so here I have the symbol of the mother, father, child triad that we're going to use. I have a case study from a client that I had this morning. We're going to talk about what the good and bad buckets are, and I'm going to explain what the shadow, mask, subconscious is. It's simply just similar words for the same thing, which really just equals why you have problems in your life, which we'll refer to as the child. So let's get into the sort of specifics. What I'd like for you to do is to get a piece of paper and label mother, father, child. We're going to create what I have here, the good and the bad buckets. Why do I use the word good and bad? I don't really like these terms, but they're terms that we all sort of universally understand. What happens when the psyche or the subconscious is being formed? I mentioned that it was formed at conception. But as a result, your sort of life experiences have confirmed that you are good or bad. Okay, so that's what we're going to break down today based on your parents. But I want you to understand how it sort of shows up in your life. When the child is born and up until 7 years old, astrologically we call this Saturn. In psych development, we call it the ego or the personality. Various psychological theories have confirmed that by 7, the personality and the ego development is sort of solidified or crystallized. We're using that same concept here. What happens is, as a child, your psyche is unable to view your parents as bad. Your parents can be abusers, your parents could have abandoned you. We've all had our story, and that for us is our downfall. But what happens is, you as a child cannot accept that your parents aren't superheroes, that your parents aren't gods. Children are very egocentric. They live within their own sort of space. So children are unable to really see their parents as bad. So we develop a coping mechanism as a child. I call this the snow globe effect. No matter how bad your childhood, no matter how bad your parents, you have created a bubble around your story. And you stay true to this story over and over and over again until something like this model comes and cracks the snow globe. That's what we're doing. That's going to be going from good to bad and really just self-acceptance, or from child to adult. I'll explain. So you observe your parents doing things that aren't necessarily good, perhaps gossiping, perhaps manipulating, perhaps stealing. And what you do as a child is you take all of that stuff and you shove it into a box. I call that the shadow bucket or the bad bucket. And that starts to accumulate. And from conception to 7 years old, you're sort of shoving all that stuff into your bad bucket. So that really all you have, your snow globe, is the good of mom and dad. Why do we do this as a child? Because we inherently know, intuitively know, that our parents created us. This is why when parents get divorced and they talk about the other parent so destructively, that destroys the child. Because the child knows I am 50% of this parent that my mom or dad is talking bad about. So that's where it's important to sort of take care of the psyche of the child. But innately, this is just what sort of happens in life. So now you've gathered for 7 years this information about your parents. Things that are good, things that are bad. A lot of these things are unspoken. Your parents might go to church and say something bad about, Sally at the door and mention how manipulative or gossipy she is. You take that information, you tuck it away. When you see your mom engage in gossipy behavior, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. This sort of becomes like this sort of pile of kind of crap that we never want to look at. That's our bad bucket, our shadow. Let me bring that example into the physical body. One of the things I ask clients in every session that they have, the first session of the shadow work, is what's the least favorite part of your body? Sometimes I get the legs, sometimes I get a stomach, sometimes I get the hands. And I invite them to go to my kitchen and get a knife. And they look at me like, what are you talking about? And I say, go get a knife and chop off your hands or chop off your stomach. And people look at me and say, what are you talking about? That's going to hurt, bleed, and I'm not going to do that. However, we have no problem sort of chopping off the parts of us in our psyche, in our mind that we don't like. Our manipulative tendencies, our victim attitude, the fact that we might be a thief, the fact that we might gossip. And so we shove them in the bad bucket. That bad bucket was inherited from your parents. So basically, we're all living as sort of half a person in our life. We're living only within the good. We don't want to see the qualities that are bad in us. We'll get to that to show you how they show up and how this is sort of sabotaging and holding you hostage. Okay? So we're going to explain in a moment with the case study the model. The good and the bad buckets. When you are observing your parents, the world, like I mentioned, children are egocentric. We're getting all of our information from mom and dad and the surroundings. And this is what sort of informs us for the rest of our life. Really, we're all children. We're all 2-year-olds having, parties. Because really, we never grow up from that sort of egocentric place unless we do some inner work. So the good and bad buckets are developed by the good and bad qualities of your parents. Now, when you're an adult, this is the beauty of being an adult physically, you can look at your parents and say, oh, my parents are this and that. And you can make a decision to be like them. But the child part of you already decided they only want to be the good of you and really ignore the bad. So in a moment, we're going to populate these buckets. The third thing I want to mention is the shadow or the mask or the subconscious. I told you in the first video how the mind is created. The subconscious is created at conception. The subconscious, Freud said, is 90%. That's sort of beneath the iceberg, that really 90% is something that's driving our needs unconditionally that we don't really understand, and only 10 is our conscious mind. I think it's more like 99%, so that's what I'm going to use. So 99% of our behaviors, what we say, what we think, how we act, the food we eat, where we live, the profession we choose, is guided by the subconscious. This is why it's so important. Only about 1% in my model, in my worldview, is really conscious decision. Being in the adult, we're going to learn to be more conscious in our choices, and that's going to make all the difference in our life. So we're going to use these words somewhat interchangeably in this model. All of this really is just ways that the child shows up. And this is why we have problems in our life. So I want to use a case study that I had this morning in practice. So I'm going to label mother, father, child. And I do this with my clients. I invite you to do this at home. Take out a piece of paper, label mother, father, child, and then these 2 boxes. And what I ask the client is, from childhood, tell me the good and the bad of your mother and the good and the bad of your father. Just for shortcut purposes, her mom was pretty loving, available. Her mother was somewhat emotional, like an emotional mess. And her father, her response was, I never knew my father. But I was told that he was selfish and not a very nice man. So this is what Alice's buckets look like, okay? An unavailable father, a father that wasn't present, a father that was selfish, and a mother that was an emotional wreck. At this point, this becomes Alice's bad bucket. So, unavailable men, emotional wreck, etc. All of the things that you populate in your bad column for your parents, you're going to move over here, and this is going to create your bad and your good bucket. Same thing is going to happen with your good. We're just going to focus somewhat on the bad since it's the shadow and really what's causing us problems. It's not that I don't like to talk about the good, but those are sort of things that we like about ourselves, and they're sort of the tools that can get us out of our problem, but we're going to focus on the bad buckets. So this now becomes the subconscious. This becomes our problems, and this becomes our pattern. Now, what do we do with the child? What I ask a client is, describe yourself as a child. How were you with your parents? When your father got home from work, what was your behavior? If you got in trouble, what did your mom do? I get some sort of information, but for the most part, describe yourself as a child. This child said she seemed happy, but she was unsure of herself. This is the subconscious. It spoke. I seemed happy. This person puts on a show, a smile, to pretend she's happy, but she's not. And she's unsure of herself. So these go into the bad bucket. This now becomes what we will call the child, or the bad buckets. Again, interchangeable. What happens? A situation enters our life, and we know that we have a mother, we know that we have a father. The moment a situation enters our life, we have a choice. We get to show up as the child, or we get to show up as the adult. In the next videos, I'm going to go step by step into the model, explaining how to use the information in the bad bucket to show you how your child shows up on the scene. I'll give you sort of a preview, and then we'll start with the next video. Every situation that shows up in your life, I say person, place, thing, or situation. It doesn't matter if you get into a fight with the barista at Starbucks, if you're in a traffic jam, if your pinky nail breaks, or if it's the drama of your life. At that moment, that person, place, thing, or situation is going to represent your mother or your father. And you have a pattern. You have been given the script for your life, and you will show up as a child. The child will automatically show up in some version of the bad bucket. Now, I have a few keywords here. How does the child show up? So you can start to recognize how that shows up in your life. You will justify, you will rationalize, you will use extremes, all or none, always, never, or you will use good and bad. We'll build on these concepts, but this is pretty much the setup. Person, place, thing, situation shows up in your life. It must represent mother or father, which we'll speak in depth in the next video, and you show up as the child. Something in your bad bucket must show up, because if there's a parent, there is a child. This model is to show you how to show up as an adult, so that you can live with free will, with your taking personal responsibility, holding yourself accountable, and having a life that maybe won't be problem-free, but at least you'll be able to come through your problem on the other end successful. In the next video, we'll go deeper into the model. Thank you.